Welcome into another episode of Preacher in the Hat. My name is Eric. We have a guest in studio with us today, but first, we're going to cue up that intro.
10 seconds till Preacher in the Hat. 5 seconds till Preacher in the Hat. You are now experiencing Preacher in the Hat.
This is another episode of Preacher in the Hat. My name is Eric. We got us a nice little setup today. It's a little different than what you're used to. But as always, first of all, if you're on video, you can tell I'm in a new spot, but which means we have an extra person in studio. But trading spots with Derek tonight is my man Chris Sumter, who you saw recently. Yeah, it worked well enough, I guess. So he's back. Derek is behind the cameras today, so we don't have a feed for him. But yeah, it's okay. Dad next to me, and Mr. Jeff Eiland is joining us in studio.
Yeah, baby.
Woo! Jeff, welcome in, man.
Just glad to be here.
So we're gonna give you a second to for your heart to reset as we just kicked it into arrhythmia there. But we have known Jeff for quite a long time now, probably going on 13 plus years.
12 and a half.
12 and a half. All
12
right.
and a half.
13 minus years. My bad. But we had some cool stuff that we wanted to talk about tonight. We recently had an episode called "The Prison Files" that this has stemmed from, and we want to talk a little bit about re-entry and tell some stories around that type of thing, and kind of bring things up, bring that episodes up to current day, if you will. So if you hadn't had a chance to listen to the Prison Files episode, make sure you go out and do that. You can do that at preacherinthehat.com or anywhere you are listening to this episode right now. So we're glad to have you. And Dad, I'm going to pass the ball over to you to get this thing rolling.
I was just thinking about one of the things I do when I go into prison, speaking of the Prison Files, is I adopted this years ago when I spoke to a group of people at Bibb County Correctional Facility. And I said this to them, to the guys in prison: you get ready for us, and we'll get ready for you. So that's reentry.
Yeah.
You getting ready for us, and we'll get ready for you. And when I say we'll get ready for you, I'm talking about society, but more specifically a church, a group of people who welcome somebody coming out of prison and embrace them in their freedom and embrace them. And oftentimes I'll say to somebody I knew in prison, welcome home. And well, they may have come back to Birmingham, and Birmingham may not be their home, but home is free world, we call it. So, Jeff, in prisons we talk about free world and penitentiary. Free world and penitentiary is how kind of we do it. So reentry is that move from the penitentiary to the free world, or it can be reentry. Military people talk about reentry back into the country. Missionaries do reentry. People coming out of treatment centers talk about reentry. So reentry can have a broader meaning, but tonight our focus is a little bit reentry from somebody who has been in prison for a period of time and then comes. So maybe just real quick, Jeff, we don't want to focus too much time on your time in prison, but just give us a little synopsis about what age were you when you went in, and how long did you do in there, and what year did you get out?
I went to prison February the 11th, 2009.
Okay.
I was 44 years old.
Okay. First time in prison.
Yeah, first time. First felony. Manufacturing controlled substance.
Okay.
I was given a 15 split 3 sentence.
Okay.
Served 3 years behind the wire, and then 5 years on probation after I got out.
Gotcha. Yeah. And so you were released on what year, and what year was it?
February the 11th of 2012.
So it was 11 to 11, February 11?
Yep.
Oh, by the way, that's some of our buddies. My grandson's birthday is their birthday, February 11th. My mom and dad were also married on that date, February 11th. So, hey, I should be able to remember that.
Yeah.
That's beside the point. That's an extraneous point. But so you got out, and what happened to you while you were in there? I mean, what kind of changes happened to you while you were in there, just for those 3 years? Briefly.
I realized real quick that that's not where I wanted to spend my life.
Well, there you go.
Typically, there's two options when somebody goes to prison. The fallacy of learning how to be a better criminal or learning how to be a productive member of society. And since I didn't want to go back to prison,
Yeah, gotcha.
I want to learn how to get out and be productive somehow.
Yeah, gotcha.
Many others choose the other.
Yeah.
It's easier. But it's a fallacy.
I know that one of the things you've told me from your story that was most difficult for you was being separated from your children, and especially your daughter, Ashley, and the grief it caused her, but also the grief it caused you, and that was a turning point for you when you recognized how it impacted her from something she said to you. There, and you tell that story publicly. We don't need to get into it so much unless you want to, but I know that was a big thing for you, was that separation from her, and from, you had a son too that you were not connected to either once you were in. So 3 years you got out, and so Chris, I'll tell you, I remember this. I remember the first time I saw Jeff when he came out of prison. I don't know if Derek and Eric, you remember that Sunday at all?
The exact, no.
I don't know. You probably wouldn't, but
I remember I went to Grace and Truth February 12th.
The church we
the
attended.
day after I was released.
You came to the bus station.
You were out of town preaching away. I do remember Derek and Eric because they were in the band, and obviously that's a big deal to me.
Yeah,
so,
you love music.
Yeah,
and you're a musician.
Right. So that I remember them well.
Yeah.
I met you the following week.
I got you.
February
I got
19th.
You. And so somebody came and picked you up at a bus station, and that was your beginning.
That's correct.
In the Birmingham area.
Yeah.
Talk about that real quick.
Can I go back a little bit?
Please.
About 6 to 8 months before my release, I needed to find a place to go.
Oh, gotcha.
Somewhere to transition to. Didn't have family or anywhere in Alabama to go, and I couldn't leave Alabama. I applied to halfway houses from Decatur all the way to Mobile.
Wow.
The only place that responded to me at all was Shepherd's Fold here in Birmingham. And they said, sure, we'll accept you. Not sure what else it said beyond that, because that's really all I needed to know,
That was the important piece of the letter, right?
Work the menu out later. Huh?
That's right. That's right. The catch came in when I got to Birmingham, got off the Greyhound bus. It was a Saturday.
That's right.
Shepherd's Fold's closed on a Saturday. So there was no one there to pick me up, and no one answering the phone when I called. So I called my dad, who was alive then in Tennessee, and I told him what was going on, and he said, just hang tight, chill out at the bus station, give me a couple hours and call me back. So I did. I think I watched basketball on the on the screen at the bus station. It
downtown Birmingham.
Right. Yeah, and that's actually the first basketball I can remember watching, probably since I was a kid. But I did. I called my dad back a couple hours later, and he said, well, I got a hold of Joel Brumback, who at the time was affiliated with Shepherd's Fold.
That's right.
And he said, Joel's going to come get you about 8 o'clock.
In the morning.
Well, he didn't tell me that yet.
Oh, he didn't? He said 8 o'clock.
It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon when he told me this on a Saturday. And I said, oh, that's cool. That's great. And then he said, in the morning. And I said, all right. That's good. I got somebody coming for me. I'll be fine.
Well, that's
You know-
a grand homecoming, isn't it? You get to spend the night in the bus station.
Yeah.
But the brother is free.
But the brother is free. That's right, Chris. The brother is free.
Yes.
And though it was cold that night, cold,
It was a different
and
kind.
basketball games, the same basketball game over and over and over. I loved every minute of it. It was great. And then the next morning, 8 a.m. on the dot, Joel walked in the front door and he said, "He hollered my name, Jeffrey Eiland." And I said, "Here I am."
You know what? I'm probably going to screw this podcast up because I think slowly. So you guys are over here and you're getting picked up.
Okay.
I'm all the way back thinking about the moment that you realized that you were going to prison.
Yeah.
And what went through your mind? Because you'd never been before. I don't know where I would even be when I realized, like, okay, this is going to happen.
Yeah.
Was that in a judge's chamber, or was that word from your attorney, or how?
It was attorney. The attorney makes the deal. The first deal she brought to me was 20 years, 5-year serve, and a $50,000 fine. And I said, I'm not really gonna. I'm not gonna sign that. It goes back to that never accept the first offer deal.
Right.
Whatever it is, it's not the best they can do.
Yeah.
So, just instinctually, I said no. And she went back and they dropped the $50,000 fine and dropped it down to a 15 split 3 with 3 to serve. And
What is 15 split 3?
15 split 3 means that if I were to violate my probation after I got out, I would have to back that 12 years up
Gotcha.
day for
Yep.
day.
Okay.
So it would have been, ultimately, I'd still or just now being released
Okay. Yeah.
if I had violated the
Gotcha.
probation.
Gotcha.
So this is like your chance. It's, the judge saying, "Okay, I'm gonna give you a shot.
Right.
It's in your hands. You do what you want with it, but this is your shot. This is all you're getting."
Yeah.
Raise the child up in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. That verse just rang in my head. And then, kind of to echo what you were talking about a minute ago with my daughter,
That's right.
when she said what she said,
Tell them what she said, Joe. I know it's tough, but I think...
he's trying to get me to cry, Chris.
Listen.
I mean, he's tugging.
No, I just think that's a powerful part of the story.
About the third day I was in jail, I called my mom in Tennessee and had her call my daughter, who was about 11, 12 years old at the time, on three-way. When my daughter heard my voice, she said, "Daddy, I can't believe you love drugs more than you love me."
Dang.
And she hung up the phone. And my mom, trying to be, loving and empathetic and compassionate, said, "I'm sorry, baby." And we got off the phone, and I went back into my cell. And these were my exact words. "God, if you can do anything with this mess that I've made of my life, you can have it."
Yeah. That was the start of something new.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, an immediate, it was an immediate request. But the change was a process.
That's right.
It just began that process of learning, show me how to live. Show me what to do. Show me how to do it. Show me how to speak.
Yeah.
How to interact with other people.
Well, that was a prayer of your heart. You were crying out to him. It wasn't Greek and all that stuff. That was just, you were just really begging him. Was she aware of the whole process of when you were going through this and that you would be going away, or was it like you just kind of sheltered her from that?
Well, no. I had custody of my daughter after my wife and I divorced. So this was for an 11 or 12-year-old little girl. This was pretty abrupt.
Yeah.
She was taken from me and her grandparents, my mom and dad, and sent to Connecticut to live with my first wife. And she really didn't know her mother. So no, for her, this was worse than my experience. of being in prison. Mine was nothing.
Yeah, he was not isolated from his daughter prior to that experience.
Right.
Do you remember the last thing you got to say to her before you went in?
And that was said when we were in court, not for my charges, for the custody, because my ex-wife took me back to court after I got in trouble. And I remember being in a private room with Ashley, and I told her I loved her, which probably seemed very empty to her. But I also told her that she should look at this as an adventure and make the best of it. And I'm sure none of that meant anything to her. But honestly, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to say I'm sorry. I didn't know how to say please forgive me.
So she was what, 11 then?
Probably 11 or 12.
11 or 12.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then the next time you got to see her free, she was?
The next time I saw her, she was 16, probably 15 and a half.
Okay.
But, that was after I got out. I think I had been out, and she came down to visit my parents for the summer. And my probation officer allowed me to go to Tennessee for a weekend or a week or something to see my family and to see her. But she didn't talk to me after that. After she hung up, she didn't talk to me for 2.5 years. Not letters. She wrote me one letter, and it was just her getting things off of her chest. You know how she felt.
Right.
And she was valid. I mean, everything she said was valid. I couldn't dispute it because my actions said the exact thing that she said.
It's interesting because from your perspective, Jeff, it was not a matter of you not loving her or you loving drugs more than her, but her perception is what mattered in that moment because that's how she perceived it. Yeah. Because of having to be separated, and so a child draws those kind of conclusions. You know, oftentimes with their family.
And I think your story gives a good look into why, because I think a lot of people probably not necessarily would be confused, but it can be difficult to understand sometimes why reentry fails so much. Yeah. And it just gives a really detailed look into that because it's not just moving back to where you lived before and walking into the house with your family and getting back to life. And I think that's a lot of times the way that we look at it is that it's like it's that simple. Yeah. But there's like so many things that your time spent in prison like crushed. One of those things was, your relationship with Ashley. And so it kind of spells out how not simple it is.
That's a good point. That's excellent. It's much more complicated than it appears, i.e. reentry.
Looking back from it now, retrospectively, and of course, we may or may not get into this later. With what I do now, it gives me the ability to be empathetic, not only with the patients and clients that I serve, but with the family members that I talk to, right? Because they feel the same exact thing as my daughter felt. Yeah. He must love drugs and alcohol more than he loves me.
Yeah, right.
And I've never met a man, a patient or a client that actually felt that way in their heart. They love their families. They love their wives. They love their children. But the alcohol and the drugs, and you know this from your work, they take over the primal part of our brain, and we do things that we have very little control over. From a logical decision-making perspective.
Well, I don't recommend this as a formula, Jeff. I did have an experience with a lady one time who was a mother of two and who could not get off marijuana. And the judge warned her that if she did not quit using drugs, marijuana, she would go to prison. And so I was trying to talk with her one day about it and said to her, is it possible that you're demonstrating that you love marijuana more than you love your kids? I knew your story. I think it was maybe before your story, but I knew of your kind of stories. And she was obviously furious at me. She was furious that I even implied to her, suggested her that. Sure enough, she kept doing it, and she went to prison. She got back out of prison about 2.5 years later, and she came to my office, and she said, I need to tell you how angry I was at you the day you told me that. She said, but while I was in prison, I learned it was true. Mm-hmm. And she said, I determined from that day forward that would never happen again. And so what I'm saying is while I was not accusing her of not loving her kids, I wanted her to see how her behavior was probably being interpreted by her children. And sure enough, she came to the realization, I see how they could feel that way. Mm-hmm. I see how they could feel that way. I see that was the message I communicated, mm-hmm. even though I didn't want to. Yeah. And it was a thing, just like in your case, it was a thing that kind of made her stop and think, is there a better way than this? Yeah. And she found a better way.
Right.
Yeah. She found a better way. But I was thinking, Eric, what you said about the dynamics of the things and how it's sometimes more complicated or at least more difficult than what we give credit. It's not just about coming home and, okay, everything's beautiful. First of all, you've changed mm-hmm. during that period of time, that 3 years, and the people in your family have changed. They've changed too. Yeah. And so sometimes they don't know your experience, you don't know theirs. And so I think what complicates reentry too is being able to come out and have people who can walk alongside you to even learn the dynamics of how the people, for example, people in families sometimes don't know whether they can trust their family member. They love them, mm-hmm. but they don't know if they can trust them because they don't know what their experience has done. Have they changed? Or are they the same? Or have they gotten worse? Because there's horror stories about how people get worse in prison. And as you suggested earlier, that certainly can be true. You can buy into that fallacy of making you a better criminal or more deceitful, those kind of things. And you buy into that culture, and then you come back out with it. So when you got out, and you went to Shepherd's Fold, and you were part of Grace and Truth, and you got a job. Mm-hmm. And one thing you said as we were kind of preparing for this tonight was you said, in all of this, one of the key things for reentry, a successful reentry, which is what we want to talk about. Right. In your case, it is successful reentry, big time. You talked about there's one important element. Tell us about that.
Willingness.
Talk more about that.
Well, when we were talking a minute ago, you say that a lot of the guys come to you now with the question of where are you going to get me a job at? What kind of job is it going to be?
Yeah.
That's the wrong question. Yeah. The right question is, when do I go to work?
What?
Right?
What time do I need to be there?
I don't care what the job is.
That's right.
Huh?
The first job I took was cleaning toilets and picking up trash. Yeah. And
you didn't ask what color the toilets were.
Did not care.
Well, and I'm going to say this. I want to interject. Prior to going to prison, he had owned his own business and made quite a bit of money.
Yeah, me and my dad worked in Auburn. We made a lot of money.
Yeah, and you were in construction with siding and so forth, I believe.
We made it. We made.
So I could tell when he walked in here, he was from money.
You could tell he was from money. Yeah,
left, man, that's gone. I spent that in prison.
You
man.
got
That's
the
gone.
vibe, did you? You got the vibe. Don't let the clothes fool you. You got the money, kind of deal.
Right. You can take the boy out of Mountain Brook, but can't take Mountain Brook out of the
boy. I still don't even know how to get to Mountain Brook.
Me neither.
Yeah. So willingness. Talk some more about that. Willingness, a job. What other kind of things? How does willingness show up other ways?
Let's go back to Grace and Truth.
Okay, yeah.
When Joel picked me up that Sunday morning.
That's right.
He said, I'm going to take you to the apartment you're going to be living in. He said, just take a shower and take it easy the rest of the day. I said, no. I said, where are we going? Where we go on a Sunday morning to worship? I said, I got some thanks I need to give this morning. Right? We went to Grace and Truth.
You came straight from the bus station to Grace and Truth.
We took a shower.
Took a shower, okay.
And then Joel picked me back up.
Okay, gotcha.
Bought me a biscuit at McDonald's, which was the first free world biscuit I'd had in 3 years. That was a big deal, Chris.
Yeah, I got it. But was it bacon, egg, and cheese? I bet you don't even remember what it was.
It was bacon, egg, and sausage.
So
there is no sausage in prison.
No,
Okay.
no sausage in prison.
No,
No
no
sausage.
sausage.
Yeah.
It was good. The willingness to go where God sends you,
Okay, gotcha.
and He sent me to Grace and Truth.
So you didn't come in with the let me critique Grace and Truth and see what these people are like. Is that what that wasn't?
You want
it
to know?
so much?
You want to know what it was?
Yeah, what was it?
Well, number one, Mike was preaching that day for you,
Oh, Mike Farrell.
and number two, Gary gave me a big old bear hug and said, "I love you." I said, "This feels right."
And Mike himself had re-entered
Yeah.
society. Talking about Mike Farrell, so he had and so Mike got to hear. Jeff got to hear Mike Farrell preach
Right
on
off
a
the
Sunday
bat.
morning, his first Sunday out. A guy that had been in prison, and in his case, he did a total of 13 and a half
Yeah.
years. So you were a rookie. You were
Yeah.
you were a short timer compared to him.
Well, he
but-
can tell a good story too. So.
Yeah, he can tell a good story. That's true. And then Gary Bonham,
Yeah.
a beloved elder who's not with us anymore, but he had a son in prison too,
Yeah.
and he understood what a father goes through in that situation. I'm not surprised he gave you a big old hug because he used to like to do that.
Yeah, he did. He did. But in a situation where my parents still lived in Tennessee,
Right.
so not having that family connection organically, let's say, and then going to Grace and Truth, and just right off the bat, just
Yeah.
feeling that family connection,
Yeah.
that love connection, where you're just
Yeah.
you just want to go back, right? Not just to hear God and worship, and be a part of the whole thing, but to be welcomed like that was just huge. In that
That's kind of why I
situation.
tell guys when they're coming out of prison, don't look so much about getting you a good church, like where you can go and you get, this is really great. I said, be more concerned about finding a family, a part of the family of God that you can get connected to.
Yeah.
Because relationships in reentry are very important, especially new relationships, because you're now talking about new playgrounds, new playmates, all that kind of stuff that they tell you in treatment and in prison and so forth. So when you come back out, you need to establish initially the connectedness, the relationships. And that was true. That was true with you at Shepherd's Fold. It was true with you at Grace and Truth, but it was also true with you at your work. And let's talk a little bit about the place you started cleaning toilets. Then what happened?
Well, first off, I have no background, had no background in mechanics.
Yeah.
Other than working on my car in the garage, with my dad when I was young. So Bill Haas, come in from, I don't know what it was we were doing that day. We were doing something that day, and I came in for the dinner. We did dinner in the evenings
right,
at 6.
right.
And Bill said, he came to me and he said, somebody called, they need 2 guys. And he wanted to know if I was willing. I said, yeah, absolutely, let's do it. He took us the next morning, me and another guy. The other guy's name was Steve. Took us the next morning, and it was in February, it might have been March, but it was maybe 2.5 weeks after I got out. Wasn't long. But that tornado had just gone through in 2011. You remember the end of
It was
2011?
in April.
Sure.
Yeah. Was it April?
It was in April when the tornado
Late
came
April.
through. Yeah.
So it had torn a lot of things up over on that side of town, and he was just going to hire a couple of guys to come in and clean the big field up out behind the shop. Me and Steve went out there and worked all week. He paid us cash, $10 an hour cash, which I thought was, that was pretty good too, right? Not bad. And on that Friday, when it came time to pay us, he took Steve aside, and then he pulled me aside, and he said, "We really like the way you work. If you'd like a full-time job here, we need somebody to run the warehouse, do the forklift and cleaning parts and that kind of thing." And I said, "Sure, absolutely." They gave me a $2 an hour raise. Then within 8 months, the owner of the company called me into his office and asked me if I wanted to become a heavy equipment mechanic, and offered to buy me a starter toolbox. And of course, let me pray about it. Let me talk to my dad. My dad was still alive at the time, I think I even talked to you about it.
Yeah.
But I went back before the end of the week, and I told him, absolutely, let's do it.
Yeah.
Put me into the head mechanic out there, taught me how to work on Caterpillar equipment.
Caterpillars. Big time stuff
Yeah.
now. It's pretty crazy.
I have
what he learned
pictures
to
if
do.
you don't believe me.
I believe you. I was just thinking as you were saying that how not to over dramatize things, you know what I mean? But in those moments, and sometimes they're very little, it's how did that make you feel when you had a guy pull you to the side? And like every little step of the way, it's like God's saying, I'm here, I've got you, I love you.
Yeah.
You know, and we're going to do this. You know what I mean? There's got to be some of those moments, and maybe sometimes you don't recognize all of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm sitting here hearing your story for the very first time, and that's how I like to hear stories, by the way. But it seems like to me there was like 5 instances right there that I've been like, ooh, ding,
Yeah.
ding,
Yeah.
ding. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Those are special moments.
Well, you know, I never asked these folks for a raise. I never asked them for promotions. But
I remember.
But I did talk to God about it. And he gave me raises on a regular basis. Promoted me. I was working on, $30,000 final drives and differentials out of Caterpillars, and things that I could never have conceived before. But everything just felt click, click, click. Like puzzles. A puzzle's fitting together, and it just starts and becomes it becomes a picture right before your eyes, and that's kind of what happened.
So then you kept getting bigger and better toolbox, if I remember correctly.
I did.
Too.
I did,
That was a
actually.
point of
I
pride.
did.
I remember in this toolbox.
Yeah.
He just loved this toolbox. And I got this. I got that. He's
I had
pretty snazzy.
At the end of before I got married and moved away. I think that was 2019, 2018.
Something
I
like
think it
that.
was 20
Yeah.
something.
20-something.
As I get older, I have a harder time.
Yeah.
But at the end of it, I had a fully paid for Snap-on classic 78 toolbox that was full of tools, all heavy equipment, heavy equipment tools, fully paid for. And I didn't
That's
know
a feat.
Snap-on any money.
You start with nothing to that. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. It's starting to sound like Joseph's story there for a minute.
Well, and the other thing is that while you're doing this, though, you decided I want to go to school.
Yeah.
Talk about that for a minute.
How are we doing on time? Because I think this might roll here for a little while.
Oh, yeah. I don't know.
We good, Eric?
Go ahead.
So, one of my roommates at Shepherd's Fold, his name was Larry. And Larry's girlfriend had done some work to get him enrolled in a psychology program. And Larry gave the recruiter, the college admissions counselor, my name and number and said, call him. So she calls me and she said, Larry says you might be interested in going to school. I had never given it any thought, any real thought. But I was just trying to get her off the phone. I said, well, if you can get me the money to go, I'll go. And the next week I started, and that was July the 17th of 2012, I think 4 or 5 months after I got out.
And when you say go to school, like, what do you mean?
Online.
Go to school for a bachelor's degree in counseling with an emphasis in addiction and substance abuse. Yeah.
Well, you're skipping over some stuff. You got to be.
Well, I was thinking, too, in the meantime here, this Ashley that he talked to started making moves that she wanted to come back and live with her dad.
That's true.
So you're right. I don't want to miss that part. So there's a lot of pieces falling into place here, Chris, at the same time.
See, that puzzle, and I've heard this analogy from someone else, the back of a tapestry. When you look at the back of a tapestry, it's kind of convoluted and muddy looking. But when you flip it over, it's a masterpiece.
Yeah. That's what was happening here.
Is he trying to make me cry right now?
I think it's the other way around. I think y'all are trying to make me cry.
I love the story of your life, but I love how what you're going through emotionally as you're going through these different phases of knowing that, because we started this whole thing about reentry,
Yeah.
and knowing that there were people in place, and you can probably name some of them, maybe you've forgotten about others, but they all played a part in getting you from inside to outside, and then walked with you.
Yeah.
During that, I mean, obviously God was with you always, but He used men
He
and
uses
women.
people.
Yeah,
He uses people. Derek, Eric, Steve, Bill Haas.
Did they get
Mike
you in the
Farrell.
band? They got you in the band.
They kind of made me work for it. I had to run sound for a
You know, the
couple
first time I ever met you, I saw you up there, and I thought, this is the only drummer I've ever seen that wore a shirt.
And I remember you telling me that, Chris. I remember you telling me that.
Yeah. Yeah,
I said, I said,
man, you
only
might be the
because
only
it's
drummer I've
church."
ever seen wear a shirt.
Only because it's in church.
That's
if,
right.
if we were out somewhere else, I wouldn't.
That's
wear
right.
it.
Because you did play musically even many years ago in a band, didn't you? I mean,
Yeah, I played.
it was a worship band, but
No,
it was
no,
a band.
I played in country bands up around Nashville. We were house band. I've been playing since 1978.
Right.
Yeah.
So this lady tells you, you know, do you want to go to school? Like, that seems out of the blue to me. Like, I don't.
Well, that's what I thought too.
Well,
right?
I was trying to figure out too why they needed you so bad to go to school.
I think she was just getting paid.
I guess.
You know, you recruit somebody, get their money, and you get a commission.
Yeah,
right?
but you said find me the money.
Well, I
No.
said if you can get the money, because I don't have any money. If you can get me covered to go to school, I'll go to school.
Gotcha.
So how long was that from the time she calls you, the recruiter, to the time you're like? I mean, you had to have been mulling around, or God had been doing something inside of your soul.
Well, once the thing is introduced, and if it's something that God wants you to do,
Right.
then you begin to fixate on that and be motivated to do that thing. And there's no doubt now, looking back, that this is definitely something God wanted me to do.
So how did that start? Because you're at what age at this point?
I was 47 years old at that time with a high school GED. I didn't even have a diploma. Dropout.
But you knew you wanted to go into counseling.
Yep.
And then what's the next step? My wife's a counselor. It's not an easy task. It's not like you don't just go down and sign up. And I mean, there's a lot that goes into that.
but now he's working as a mechanic the whole time.
Right.
That he's going online to school. He didn't quit the
My
mechanic
wife,
shop.
she was working as a wife
So
and a mother.
And knowing you, that was much
Yeah,
more.
I'm going to say a lot of work. That was a
Yeah.
lot of work.
so all told, how many years? Now, obviously, you weren't always a full-time student, so let's make sure we throw that caveat in there.
Yeah.
All told, how many calendar years in school?
8.
All right.
Yeah. 8.
And he ended
How
up
many
with 2
degrees?
master's degrees.
That's another good question.
He's ended up with 2 master's degrees.
I have
but
a
8
bachelor's in counseling,
Hey.
a master's in mental health and wellness, and a master's in social work.
I can't even tie your Vans, man, with that many degrees.
Come
By
on.
the way, I wish we'd get a shot. This cat is dressed. I mean, he's got the tats. He's got the earring. He is bringing so much street cred to this podcast tonight.
Yeah, baby. Yeah, baby.
I'm all with it. I love it.
You know,
Street
you
cred, I
can
like
get
it.
your Vans on eBay for like a fraction of the cost, man.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
Street cred
Well, there
purchased
you
on
go.
eBay.
I believe if Paul Newman and Robert Redford had a baby, it would look like you.
Okay. I don't
I'm
know
not
how I
even
feel
kidding.
about that, but okay.
He looks good in that camera, don't he?
Right.
I liked Paul because he drove race cars.
Yes, he did. Yes.
We're gonna have to do some editing
And made some great
post.
salad dressing.
I agree.
Made
I
some
agree.
very good Thousand
Still
Island.
does.
Yes, he does.
Still does.
Yes, he does.
But we
But we digress.
We digress.
We digressed a long time ago.
Yeah, we did.
I don't know if we have time for another segment, but I really would love to hear about how Eric said you told Eric it took you 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then how is God using just all that you've been through to do what you do now? And who do you work with, and what changes and things have you seen, and just
And that's
That might be episode
That's a good
2.
story too.
Yeah, I bet
It's
it
a really
is.
good story.
So while I was at Shepherd's Fold, I eventually became a leader of a house, which is just someone who kind of makes sure the house is going in the right direction. Nobody's going out and doing crazy things. I mean, it's no big deal.
A den mother.
Yeah, something like that, or whatever you call the scoutmaster, whatever. After a period of time, another dinner that Shepherd's Fold sponsored through, I think it was Hunter Hills Baptist Church?
Hunter Street.
Hunter Street Baptist Church. A gentleman from Hunter Street came in, and I was sitting at a table by myself, and he said, "You mind if I sit down?" I said, "No, absolutely, sit down." And he and I started talking, and I mentioned that I
Another
was
ding
looking.
moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mentioned to him that I was looking for a place to live because I wanted my daughter to come down and visit for the summer. That would have been the summer of 2013. And the man's name's Richard. Richard said, "Well, I have these apartments down in Alabaster, and I'm looking for a resident manager. And we're going to make this like a three-quarters house where they go after they do the halfway house. But before they're out just in the wild, in the free world,
Yeah, that's
as
right.
we say." And again, I told him the same thing. Let me pray about it. And I talked to Steve about it, talked to my dad about it. The next day I called him, set the wheels in motion, became the resident manager at the villas in Alabaster, which had 6 apartments, 2-bedroom apartments, where we took in people that were in recovery, that had been released in the reentry programs, pretty much anybody we could find that needed a place to stay and were under some type of limitation.
The supervision.
Yeah, some type of something. But we would take anybody.
That's right. They could come out of treatment. They could have been coming out of treatment. Could have come out of prison.
Yeah.
It didn't. But it's reentry. It was reentry focused.
So my duties were to collect the weekly dues, to give drug screens, random drug screens when I thought had some suspicions, and to run a group once a week in my apartment that was not only a Bible study but a recovery based type group.
And then Ashley came and lived with you
She sure did.
for her senior year of high school.
She sure did.
And she was-
Mid-year.
Mid-year, she came for her senior year of high school, lived with Jeff there at that place, and that reconciliation with her was complete.
That was December of 2013.
How about that?
The 17th, she called me and said, "Can I come live with you?" And I said, "If you can get your mom to sign off on it."
What was that phone call like?
The 23rd, she flew into Atlanta. I picked her up. She hadn't go back. She never went back. You
Jeez.
kidding, right?
That must have been like,
And she's married, but they're still hanging out today, these days.
Yeah, we went to the Alabama game Saturday.
With Alabama.
Pretty cool.
And she's an Auburn fan. How about that?
But she used to be.
Used to be. That's right.
Daddy's working on that. Yeah.
Well, you like your story basically, goes all the way back to what you said, 2009, or 2009, right? From and I know we didn't have time to get into how everything fell apart at the start, but that's not the most important details anyway. But the way that you shared that whole we got a great look at the entire process of what reentry looked like for you and how God used people every single step of the way to where you are now helping people. I don't even know in what all kinds of ways that were in similar spots, to what you have been in your life. So you explained all of that so well, and I think this probably won't take very long, but I want you to close on one thing. What does that whole process that we talked about, that you described, your reentry, what does that look like without Jesus? What would that have where would Jeff Eiland be?
That's easy. Nowhere. There is no beginning to that story without Jesus. He is the story. All of those pieces that fit together, all of those peoples that crossed my path, that are still in my life and are an important part of my life, though we may not talk as much as we once, I don't love you guys any less. And I know that sentiment is the same the other way around. So without Jesus, there is no beginning to it, no middle and no end at all.
Well, you heard it right there. That's it. I mean, there is no story without Jesus. Jeff, that's just so incredibly powerful, and we're grateful for you sharing that. Because that's the kind of thing we've tried to say from the beginning, and some people just have stories that tell it even better than we do, and that's why we had you in today, and we're so glad that you were able to share that with us. So for Chris over here and Dad to my left, Derek behind the cameras, our man Jeff Eiland, my name's Eric. This has been another episode of Preacher in the Hat. We'll see you next time.